Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast. Each week, your host, Casey Hasten, Director of Recruiting at VIP, will bring you valuable insights from thought leaders, introduce you to incredible companies, and bring you tips for landing your dream job from our team of executive recruiters at VIP. And now, Casey Hasten.
Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast, a podcast devoted to adding value to your career or candidate search, brought to you by VIP. I'm your host, Casey Hasten. I'm an executive recruiter, director of recruiting with VIP, and your all-around hiring guru. And you know it's my absolute pleasure to bring you amazing guests each week. And this one, he comes with his own little descriptor. He is known as being adorkable, which I love. So I'd like to welcome Stæven Frey, the founder and chief strategy scientist of Quantum Branding. Stæven is an award-winning speaker and design brand educator who helps brands become authentic and memorable category leaders through the power of brand science. He's been leveraging the power of proprietary brand science method for the past 18 years, having worked with over 150 brands in more than 65 categories, aiding them in their success through articulating insight into their brand's growth, sales, and marketing. Through his playful, and you will see that, and passionate charisma, he makes the science of branding easy to understand. Thanks so much for joining us today, Stæven.
Thanks for having me, and thank you, listeners and viewers, for joining us today. We're really excited to see where we go and what we're gonna talk about and where we're gonna take this all.
You know, I have to start with your descriptor because when I read that, when I was first sent your media package, and I saw that, and I was like, I got to talk to this guy. I mean, I don't know anybody else who is described as adorkable. So how did people come up with that description for you?
So here's a kind of a thing about nicknames is sometimes they're given to you whether you want them or not. So I don't know if anybody else has ever gotten a nickname, but somebody said it to me once, and they told me that I was a dork, just because I was a dork. But they're like, you're a cute dork. You're kind of adorable. You're kind of adorkable, and so that's kind of just stuck ever since. And it's a really good descriptor. I have a very eclectic home. I rescue animals. I like squishmallows. We'll talk about that later, maybe. But I have very much a sense of curiosity and wonder that's been the same ever since I was little. And one of my favorite stories that my old babysitter used to tell me is that one time she brought me in, I was maybe 3 or 4 at the time, trying to put me in bed. And she got me out of the kiddie pool, got me into my pajamas. She turned around and I literally was back in the pool in my pajamas. So so around my house, we call it orange cat energy. Just orange cats are just lovable. They're friendly. They're sweet. And they're also wise and kind. So it's just par for course.
I love that. And I just noticed that on your signature today that you have like the little memes for orange cat energy. And I was asking you right before we came on, I was like, what? You surprise me every time we talk with something new and eclectic. Oh my goodness.
Fox mugs are. We got surprises all episode for you, folks. So anybody who is listening, I just held up my mug, and it's a little Fox mug. So I mean,
and it's orange.
Doesn't everybody who runs in an award-winning branding agency drink out of a small little orange Fox mug? I don't know. I do. So.
I love that. So tell us a little bit about quantum branding and brand science. What inspired you to create these?
Absolutely. So I think it was about 2003, 2004. I was finishing up undergrad. I needed a DBA, a business name to come up with. And I had discovered a principle that resonated with me just about the basics of quantum and quantum theory in regards to chemistry and energy, not kind of in the current modern understanding of quantum physics and all the words and quantum healing and some of these more woo-woo sounding things. For me, it was very much a descriptor of how energy is described. And basically, for energy for you to change, well, first let's start back. You are defined by the energy you have,
Mm-hmm.
And change can't occur unless it's taken or given. Is it from within or is it from outside? And I thought this was a really great metaphor. And so I'd started my agency kind of as a DBA and was always moonlighting in the background. And then 2009, I went out on my own after having worked at several agencies as a creative director, as an art director, and senior level designer there. And so when I started, my agency, it was just a continuation of the work that I'd been doing, working on multiple campaigns across, print, web, video, digital medias, or electronic media is what they called it back in 2004. But digital
That's a
media
long
is what
time
we know
ago.
today. I was actually just thinking about that course I had to take. I was like, oh, electronic media research. Now it's just called memes.
Yeah.
Electronic media research is just memes. Oh, if they could have had a heyday with that one. But I thought it was a great metaphor. The quantum theory is a great metaphor for branding, and it's a great metaphor for us as people and businesses, as businesses often are expressions of the humans that start them and work with them. And so for you to be defined by what? Your energy? And I thought it was, at the time, a distinctive approach that was distinct in the category. Everyone kind of sells their own. If you go to the cookie aisle, you expect cookies, but they're all just a little bit different. And that's an example that I often use. You can't be too different, because if you're different, your cake, your pie, your crackers, or chips. So if you're a cookie, and to use that metaphor, you've got to be a distinct cookie. And so my distinction point was the idea of the quantum theory. And ever since then, I've been exploring and uncovering what are the reasons why branding works the way it does. And so that's led me to the development of BrandScience, which is kind of an extension of marketing science. And marketing science has existed, since the early 50s. We didn't call it that, but in essence, marketing research about the efficacy and the effectiveness of marketing has existed since the early 50s. And so to extend that section of marketing science and say, wait a second, how does branding itself specifically work? How do we capture it to be most effective? But then there's the human experience side of saying, like, okay, what are the experiences we're creating? How does this make people feel? Does it feel good? Does it feel bad? So there's kind of this, on one side, there's a very, very scientific explanation to things. Like, I can tell you a story and it can stress you out because there's conflict, and then it can resolve. And I can say, oh yeah, that's oxytocin and cortisol. But that doesn't change the fact that you just felt a lot of empathy for the main character as this horrible event happened that propelled them into an impetus of being the hero throughout the movie, and they fall in love, or they whatever at the end, and it's resolved. So there's a scientific explanation, and then there's the human experience side. And so my goal is to really kind of marry those two together based on how do we create experiences that are intentional, that are in alignment with our message, with what we're trying to do or create or be out in the world. And interestingly enough, some people have caught on and they pay me money. And so that's why we're here today talking about it, because it works. And I'm so passionate about it because it is based in science. And it's not kind of just a theory. It's not just the newfangled thing. There actually is an authoritative understanding to what this is. So long-winded answer, but hopefully you'll forgive me because I'm a dork book.
You are forgiven infinity. I promise you. But I kind of want to go back to that and I'm not sure if this is the science that you're talking about, but when you and I had our pre-interview conversation, you talked about the neuroplasticity sequence. Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of things packed in. There's typically kind of three bundles of science. So imagine if you're buying a set of products or reading a book and there's three parts to it. There's kind of three parts to this too. You kind of got to get them all together. So the first part is kind of how we experience the world. And then the second one is how we capture that information. And the third one is kind of how we interpret it. So that's kind of bundled together. But here's a really good example. So the cool thing is that everybody has minds. If you're listening today and you're able to interact with us, you have a mind.
That's an assumption.
And that's right. So we're going to hope that you're able to.
Just kidding.
But the idea is, here's an example. Think of something that's in the fridge. Just follow along, and anyone listening along with me can follow this along. So just follow your own train of thought. Don't try to get ahead of me. Just stay with us. So I'm going to invite you to go to your fridge in your home, imaginarily, and open the door and get something that's white. Okay, now can you get me something that's white that's also in the door, not in the main part? Can you also make sure that you get me something that's a condiment? And is it in a jar? And is it also a vegetable? And a lot of people just got really frustrated with me because they started with milk and then they went to eggs, and maybe some of you were like, ooh, cream cheese, sour cream. And then I said door, and you're like, milk. And then you said, and then I said condiment, and you said, ooh, mayo. Maybe you said ranch. I'm going to disagree with you. Ranch is a sauce. Even though it may say ranch dressing, I don't know. I hate condiments, so that's my way around that one. But maybe you went to ranch, and then I said in a jar, so that gets rid of salad dressing. And then maybe you're like, I don't know, Stephen. Maybe some of you landed on onions if you're a Chicagoan and you put it on hot dogs. I don't know. But most of us maybe thought horseradish, or maybe some of us got stumped. But that experience that I described to you, it's just a magical lesson in just one of 13 plus and counting sciences called semiotics. And semiotics is this process where we store in our mind in little boxes contextually based on the world around us, how we perceive things, and then basically, so like in China, maybe they have spicy mayo, or maybe they may have a different product if you're in a different location. So maybe actually based on where you are, you don't have horseradish. You've never heard of horseradish. I don't know what that is. And this is maybe being translated into your favorite language that you speak natively. I don't know. And I'm sorry about that. So the experience we described is called semiotics. And it's simply how your brain, like a March Madness bracket, says animal, vegetable, mineral, fridge, white, food, sauce, condiment, color. And we do this in every part of our life. And this is also the same reason this use of semiotics is and I mentioned about where you're located, because that's important too, because at the end of the day, geolocationally, you may have a different set of variables. Maybe maybe you don't have a fridge. Maybe you don't have condiments like American condiments. So the challenge is contextually, things that are true for you may not be true for me. So we have to keep this in mind. And so a great example of that is how yellow may mean lemon when we're talking about sweet tea and flavors. And so there's a little bar of yellow across the bottom of packaging. But yellow means stained teeth when you're talking about the dental industry. So it's probably not advisable for us to create a brand that's lemon mint. And Colgate and Crest kind of tried to do this. I forget which one, tried to do this a while ago. It didn't fly. People are just not going to want to buy a product that is yellow. Any part of it is yellow. Even the color of the lemon, like they tried to make it as least saturated as possible, and then the rest of the package was, I think, blue. I think it was Crest who did this. But the example is that not everything means the same thing. And so that's just one example of how branding works. It's based on the lenses that we have, the information we receive, and the geocontextualization and the context of the information. So there's a lot of factors here. And so if you want to go make your brand better, if you want to start a brand, maybe you need to go a new direction in your brand. The answer, unfortunately, is not just go to Fiverr or hire your friend's kid in college who just downloaded Illustrator. It's very well intending, but there's actually so much more science. You're being hindered by what you don't know that you don't know. And so you're not going to get as fast and as far and as fast as you want, because there's several things that are standing in the way that you just may not be aware about.
That's so interesting that you put so much science behind it. And I love that you talk about the semiotics. Did I say that correctly? Semiotics?
Yeah, semiotics, yeah.
Semiotics. Okay, because I'm fascinated with the brain, and even what you just talked about the way we store it can be used in everyday life, like when we're communicating with other people and if we want to get them to go in a certain direction, like in a business meeting or a sales meeting or whatever, that can be used. So that's definitely something I am going to start researching, because now you've turned me on. You've put me down another rabbit hole. Thank you. So I'm following
Yeah.
the
And this is a
orange
great,
cat energy.
yeah, that's right. And here's a great example. Know how I talked about getting further faster?
Hmm.
I didn't talk about how your marketing is broken. I didn't
Right.
talk about how you're doing it wrong. And there's a nuance in the language that we use and kind of that linguistic anchoring, whether that's in how we describe ourselves. We want to use language that people are already using, that they're familiar with, and also value. We also do this with shape and color and story and characters. So say I'm going to make a vegetable brand. I make the vegetable brand. What am I going to create? I'm going to create maybe a mascot. And that mascot, he's going to be friendly and be vegetable-y. And is he's going to be maybe cute, because maybe that's important. So, I mean, now everyone's thinking Jolly Green Giant, because why? Because why? Because I said vegetable and I said mascot, and he's the only one that you can think of. So if I'm going to launch a new vegetable brand, I have to acknowledge that there's already a vegetable brand mascot out there. And I don't want to trigger that mascot, because that's a shared memory structure for everyone else, even if it is distinct to that brand. So when I'm using language, it's like using people's names. Their name, they may not think of themselves, their name is their favorite word, but it's probably the most important word to them. So when I meet someone, I tell them, like, oh, it's so great to meet you, Stephen. And I find out their name. You guys did this with me. You asked how to pronounce my name. That was so kind of you. We just want to make sure we get it right. Why? Because that's the first step to show that you're important. So when we use that language is the same as a bundle of your brand strategy, both your visual assets and your verbal assets. So language has a huge part. And so I'm excited to hear that you connect so much with the importance of language in that.
Oh, absolutely. And to that point, I do a lot of interviews around the country, and a lot of times the producers will come on ahead of time and they'll say, "How do you pronounce your last name?" And my last name, it can really go one of two ways. It can be Hasten or it can be Hasten. What do you think people go with that don't ask how to pronounce it?
The one that's not it.
Yes. And sometimes I'll tell them right before, I'm like, it's Casey Hasten, because to me, that's my brand. That's my personal brand. The way that my name sounds when you say it, Casey Hasten, right?
Right.
It kind of,
And that's what's funny is when it's not said right, what does it do? It doesn't resonate.
exactly.
Interesting noticing. So when stuff doesn't resonate, does that motivate you or does that demotivate you? And so it's interesting. We find that language is connected to an internal understanding of things that resonate. And what's interesting is there's other science at play. Is a lot of the time people are on autopilot. If you're familiar with computers and RAM, this is not the best metaphor for the brain, but we've always likened the language of technology to the brain. Back in the day, before the advent of computers, they talked about it like a clock. They talked about it like an engine. We've always done this as humans. And so we always have adopted those languages to try to help understand. But there's basically two systems going on. And what's interesting is your brain likes to conserve energy. So what does it do? It truncates stuff.
Yes.
It on purposely does not remember things that it says are not important. All the while actually gathering information about the sensory world around you. Believe it, the word senses, we think of them like, oh, they're like 5 magic abilities. But no, they're actually trying to make sense. We don't know what the heck it is. They're trying to make sense. And so I actually have SPD, sensory processing disorder. So my senses are a little bit different. I can't go to loud places. I have a service dog. If there's too many lights or sometimes if there's too strong of a smell, it's like driving out of town listening to your favorite radio station. It starts like and it starts to fade. You can't tune in anymore. And so what we find out is that when people are using their senses, they're gathering information and it's on autopilot. And so we are automatically referencing, right, via semiotics, these stored information, and that stored information remembers stuff that is what? Distinct. So it remembers things that are distinct about you: word, shape, colors, story, photography, verbiage, words, maybe a blouse or earrings, because they remember, like, oh, the lady with the pretty hair, or she always wears a brooch, or that person, he's always got fun socks. What? We remember distinctive things, not different, distinctive. And so they stand out in our mind, and they get logged. They get logged in our brain, and then that gives us more memories. The more memories we have about something, the more we are likely to what? Think of it first.
Mm.
And that, my friends, is basically what branding is. Branding is just the use of distinctive assets: word, shape, color, story, sound, character, music, all the different possible sensory experiences we have, so that at the end of the day, you have more memories about your brand, so people can remember you first. So if I said to you, hey, I'm coming to visit you, where should we go out to eat?
Oh, are you really
And
asking
you would
me?
say,
Lupe's tortilla.
yeah. I said, right. So what is it again?
Lupe's tortilla.
Okay, we're going to Lupe's.
Okay.
Because why? Lupe's was on the top of your brain. You thought of it first because you have some memories there, the food, so you have some sensory experiences. Maybe there's music. Maybe you can visualize the brand mark in your head. Maybe you can see the building, the shape of the building. You have sensory experiences that are reminding you that we are going to go to Lupe's.
We're going
So
to
that's just a
Lupe's
basic
and get here.
example.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I've got actually 2 places to take you. I'm going to take you to Lupe's, and I'm going to take you to 12 Cuts Brazilian Steakhouse. Do you like meat?
Yes, I grew up on a beef cattle farm. We like meat, good tasty meat.
Oh, it's the best. It's the best. So that's where we're going to go. So shout out to my friends over at Lupe's and 12 Cuts Brazilian Steakhouse, Alda and
Please sponsor this
JJ.
episode.
They've been so good to us. They are really, really good to us, and they put a lot of good energy out in the world, and their branding is on point. But I'm sitting here thinking about this, and I love what you said about, yes, a lot of people will go to Fiverr to get their marketing done, and for my personal brand, I did hire a marketing agency, and I felt like they did a really good job on that, and it was so interesting because we had a conversation, like not even a very long one, like a 30-minute conversation. And then they went and scoured like my social for what I had been doing in the past. And then the next thing I know, they're like, go check out your website. And I'm like, oh, is that really me? But it really was. It was the essence of me, but it was the essence of me that I was afraid to say, here I am. And they looked at it and they said, here you are. This is who you are. Mm-hmm. And then I could lean into that and say, I am that person for sure.
And what I hear you sharing in that story is that somebody had the ability to, with their assistance, give you permission to be more authentic, to actually describe visually and verbally what you already were, who you already are, what you're already doing, but more specifically, more succinctly, it's the difference between like somebody who's going out and just running errands versus somebody who's going out and running errands on the way home from work or to the gym, and they're like, okay, I have to do this and this and this, and so they consider their wardrobe. And there was a really famous commercial where the guy like went to do go to the grocery store and he won the lottery, but he was wearing like dirty underwear or something like that. And then like by the end, it was like, better do your laundry, so when we do certain things, we think of how the outfit we're wearing, but sometimes we're on autopilot. And so we don't think, or we're doing our best. But what if somebody just comes in and says, ooh, his name is Dante. I don't know. Maybe Dante does your hair, and this is, Cam. And Cam comes in and says, ooh, love this hair. And what about these shoes and this belt? And what they help you shine. And ooh, we cinch the weight because this helps flatter your body. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Somebody comes in because what? We're humans having a human experience. We don't always often know how other people are experiencing us. And the same for our businesses. We're doing the talk and walking the walk every day, but when do we actually work on our business, not just in our business? And so working with professionals like you just described, or myself, we're able to come in and say, so what I hear you saying, where you want to go is, what I hear you wanting to do is. And so that gives us permission to be a little bit more bolder. It's the difference between like, that outfit's okay, to like, yes. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make, through effective branding, through scientific evidence-based metrics of branding, we're helping people look at your business and get it quicker. I just worked on a project and it was sweet tea seltzer. It was hard sweet tea seltzer using a carbonated sweet tea wine product. And at first, they had a different name and they came to us. And so we created this new brand. And now when you look at it, you're like, oh, I get it. It's called Hard South. It's regional. But when you look at it, it looks like, vintage Southern, nostalgic. Oh, there's tea leaves. Oh, sweet tea is blue. You don't know that sweet tea is blue, but you know that in the category, when you're picking the one, you pick the blue one because it says sweet on it. So we're like pulling all these things together like that firm did for you. We're pulling them all together and be like, oh, there's gingham on the bottom. Gingham says South. Oh, whitewashed wood, that says South. The fact that it's called Granny's recipe for the sweet tea, and unsweet is Grandpa's recipe, and the way all the language and everything visually and verbally, so that when people walk down, the seltzer aisle, they look at it and they get it. Like their brain already knows, oh yeah, that orange one is peach, the yellow one is lemon, the blue one is sweet. Oh, they go together. I can buy the original or the multi-pack. And we're using these shapes and these languages that are rooted in what your brain already knows, and then give them a couple little treats. So what we're doing is we're saying marketing, the modalities change over time, whether it's print, web, video, digital, VR. I don't know if that's going to exist. But all of those are saying, hey, do business with me. And effective branding is building more memories so people think of you first.
I love a quote that I wrote down when we were talking before, and it was your call to action. And I think this kind of sums up everything that you just said, because you said, make it easier for people to remember you. Mm-hmm. And I think when it comes to careers, and when you were going on interviews, like, and this is going to be a little bit of a pivot, so I want you to work with me here.
But absolutely. Oh, yeah.
How would you recommend, or what would you recommend someone who's going for a job interview to do to help make it easier for that hiring manager to remember them?
Sure. Well, here's so a few things. I want you to remember that unseen is unsold. That's the first principle. Whether we're talking about businesses, whether we're talking about recruiting, whether we're talking about executive leadership search, or we're talking about you and maybe you're not executive leader yet and you want to be. Regardless of where you are in the spectrum of your career and where you are, unseen is unsold. Now, I don't want to advocate meritocracy, that it's all about achievement, because oftentimes people who do the better work or more work get rewarded with more work, and we get buried and often sometimes there's that X factor of the person who's not working the most. So step back and think that unseen is unsold, and just ask yourself, how am I being seen? And just kind of like think through the different lenses. How am I seen as in my coworkers? When they invite me to go get drinks that first time, when I first join, afterwards, do I say, no, I'm going to stay here and work? And then after a while, they stop asking me. So you're not seen relationally. And then maybe rapport-wise, you never talk to your boss, or maybe you do talk to your boss all the time or none of the time. What is it about? Is it often complaining? Is it asking for something to change? What is the lens, the interpretive lens that those people are seeing you in? And think about it this way, like there's the principle of give, and then ask. And that's just a really good metaphor to say, like, are you giving to other people before you're asking of them? And so are they seeing you as a taker or a receiver? So some other things, obviously, don't, some easy ones that stand out for some people like myself who have strong aversions to really strong perfume. Don't be like a church grandma and wear the same perfume all the time. And you're not used to it. And so you keep putting more on so that you can smell it. Don't be nose blind. So don't be nose blind. And that's also a good metaphor. Don't be nose blind or insensitive to the things that are going on because you're around them all the time. So how are you being seen by others? What are the ways that you may present yourself, and how can other people see that? And there's another acronym. So I said unseen is unsold. Notice, attract, get, NAG. So if people notice, give people opportunities to notice. I had someone who I'd been emailing them for 5 months. And then I finally upped my game and I said, hey, and this was for an application. It had nothing, it's not anything professional, but I just changed my modality and I gave them a call and I left a voicemail. Within 10 minutes, would you believe they called me back to talk to me about my application and thanked me for calling?
Wow.
Even though they literally said, please, no calls. You know, like, be bold. Be bold. How are they going to notice you? One time I even created a really, really, really cool campaign for an art director job. I made a homemade crate, like a tiny little crate. All the kitties got inside it and took turns in it. And I put my favorite citrus in there. I put oranges and tangelos and clementines in there, and some little like paper. And I sent them, and I also put in a custom little can of orange segments, and it was tailored to the job at the time. And it said art director creative segments, and literally made a custom label, like as if you would have bought this on the shelf. And then on the back, the nutrition label was the qualifications that I had for the job. A few days later, I sent them a can opener and a juicer and said, hey, let's talk. I've got the right tools for the job here. So I sent them a follow-up to my follow-up that was creative. And you know what? They never got back to me. Could she have been having a bad day? Does she maybe not care? Is she a horrible person? I don't know. That's not my job to figure that out. But I got enough information that, like, listen, I went to all that effort and they didn't even say, like, hey, thanks. That's really cool. We don't have anything for you right now, but it's not going to, so, but thank you. That was really cool. I didn't get that. So they didn't notice me. So I moved on. I'm going to move on to someone that does notice me. And then I went to another agency. And the agency said, Stephen, your work's incredible. We don't want you. And I said, what? And he goes, you need to start your own firm. And he went through case by case of what he saw in me and said, hey, I see you doing this, this, and this. I think you should open your own firm. Consider it. But we're not going to hire you. This is a sweatshop. You've got better chops for this. I've worked with people for 25 years and can't teach them how to think. I love how you think, and I think you should go do it. So wouldn't you, now hearing this story, be like, yeah, I'm so glad you didn't get that art director job, or else we wouldn't be here on the show together. We wouldn't have been talking about, the work I do at, Mars Pet Care or Target or Walmart or Michael's. We wouldn't be talking about any of those things. Had someone noticed me, but it not resonated and gave me a job. So think about NAG, notice, attract, get. If people notice, oh, Stephen, they're attracted. Oh, I love this guy's vibe. And then they get what you do, whether that's they get your values, your chemistry, your personality, or they work with you professionally. You can look at it both ways. But I think NAG, unseen is unsold, are people noticing you, and NAG, notice, attract, get, are two really, really great, powerful considerations and interpretive lenses as you walk into the workforce, whether that's for new roles within your organization or yourself specifically.
I tell you what, we could talk all day long. You have so much information. We've got to have a follow-up phone call after this, and I'll tell you why after the podcast. But I just love the work you're doing. I love that you're so open to put it out there. And I'm not going to have time to ask you all three of our VIP questions today, but I do want to ask you one.
Okay, which one is that one?
So I want to know, if your life's work was being summarized in a news article, what would the headline be?
Ooh, that's a good one. So if it's a news article, I'm going to assume that there's multiple news articles and there's multiple things going on. It's not just like one like penultimate epitaph of like, oh, Stephen's done. Here's his life's work. So I think if my life's work is being summarized, it would be like get to know America's national treasure, or get to know the adorable BrandScience next door and everything you need to know about BrandScience. I think that would be it. I think that article would tell a little bit about, neurodiversity and say like how that's been part of my path, but also how science and brand science is important and how it helps you in your business. And it can get you out of this rut of every time there's a new dude and I say dude, in a non-gender binary way, dude or person that comes out and says, oh, marketing story, or, violet bovine, I'm being very ambiguous here with ambiguous creative titles. But every time there's a new marketing book that comes out, you're like, oh, we need to get the violet bovine system or the marketing story system installed, and it creates this treadmill. Your marketing team hates it. Let's just start there. Your marketing team hates it. They don't want to learn another thing. I know you got $5,500 to go to a conference led by this New York Times bestseller dude or person, and you're listening to this thing and you are excited. But here's the question. Is it evidence-based? Is it something that you can initially learn and you can just strategically implement one thing? Or can you implement all of them? What if you just implement one thing? Because if you can implement one thing and just come back with one thing and implement it, and it's based on science, then it's legit. But if you have to understand their whole system and try to install it into your team, into your product, and it change everything you do, then that's really kind of more about control and you being part of their system and their ecosystem. And really, it's just like hanging out with the cool kids on the back of the bus. So we don't want to do that. We want to not just do, like, I don't know about you, if you rode the bus, the kids in the back were cool and you listened to them. But then when you got in trouble for like talking about the birds and the bees and swearing, those cool kids weren't around. Yeah. Likewise, these cool kids aren't going to be around when you get in trouble with your brand. So what we need is something authoritative. So that's what, whatever that summary is, we would hire a quality journalist to do a summary news article here, because clearly I can't do that. So I can't summarize. So adorkable brand science next door and everything you need to know about brand science. That's for 200. That's the answer.
I love it. How do people find you? Because I know there's going to be people that want to find you to get some help with their brand, especially after hearing, I'm one of them. So.
Absolutely. So in the show notes, we're going to give you a link. I've got a link tree, and the link tree is just a link full of all other links on there, but it's linktr.ee. You can find it. Stæven Frey with my name spelled correctly. If that's hard enough, we'll give you the link in the show notes. But on my link tree, you can go there, and there's a couple really cool things you can do. On the link tree, you can find out, how is my brand doing? How do I get started all this with the brand science checklist? You can click on that, and it's just a bit.ly link. It's bit.ly/brand science checklist. That is the starting point. You can watch an award-winning talk. You can join my Facebook group, Brandometry, or you can check out what I do in the Brandpreneur program. So there's a couple different avenues. You can get a checklist. You can go to my site. You can find out about our program. You can watch a talk. You can even hire me to come speak. There's lots of avenues. The goal is for you to feel confident knowing that you are using evidence-based metrics in your brand every day. So you make it easier for people to buy, easy for your customers to sell, easy for you if you're senior leadership to sleep at night, and easy for your team to sleep at night, and so that they have work-life balance, because we are using evidence-based science here to help get you moved forward faster and authentically and memorably share who you are, what you do, and why it matters. So check out the link tree. We're going to send it to you, Linktree, Stæven Frey, and you can check out that bit.ly link, bit.ly/brand science checklist.
I love that. And I highly encourage everyone listening to this episode, because it doesn't matter if you're launching a full personal brand or a brand for your company, or if you're just looking to be on point with your interviewing, with your career. All of this applies to every area of your life. So I really appreciate you being here today, Stæven. And I just have one last thing to say to you. You are a VIP.
Oh, thank you. You are too.
And that's a wrap for today. Join us next week here on the We Are VIP podcast. We'd love to know how we can help you be a VIP.
To find out more, log on to wearevip.com.